This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome to episode 157 of A Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and today's sponsor is BurkaWeb. If you are looking for a web host provider, but you aren't sure how to choose one, maybe you're not sure which one is actually the fastest or the best or whatever, definitely check out BurkaWeb.com. That's BerkawEB.com. BurkaWeb is a free online resource maintained by Mark Burka, and he's a listener of the show. He's actually done some speed tests and things for AGleader.com in the past, done excellent work. But anyway, and back at BurkaWeb.com, you will find test comparison from hosting providers in different categories, such as which hosts are the cheapest, have the cheapest annual plans, which providers have the cheapest renewals after their first year, because that's where some of them get you. They'll give you that free or really cheap first year, and then after that, the price goes way up. They also talk about hosts with the longest money-back guarantees and much, much more. In contrast to many other hosting review sites, Mark's site actually formulates and recommends by actually purchasing the hosting plan from each company, putting up speed tests, doing all the metrics, and figuring out which ones are actually the best. And you will be getting an objective look at truly what is the best quality hosting provider. Not just a rehash of some company's own marketing claims, but he's actually putting the work in to get the metrics and get the actual data. So definitely check that out at BurkaWeb.com, BerkawEB.com. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, we've got Dr. Liz Bywater. Now, you might remember she was on the show before, and we talked about her book, Slow Down to Speed Up. But with all that's going on with COVID-19 and people working from home, and things have kind of been forced to slow down a little bit, I thought it'd be a good idea to have her back on the show and help us out and give us some encouragement and some things to think about as leaders when we're going through this kind of situation. So, Liz, welcome back to A Geek Leader.
Hey, thanks, John. I'm really glad we have a chance to speak today. I think you're right. There's quite a lot that we could talk about and hopefully be of help to some of the folks who are listening in.
So first off, how are things going with you? Are you surviving quarantine?
I am very much surviving quarantine. Like so many people, it is, I'm learning how to adjust. Life is different than it was 2 months ago. It's astonishing to me that we're actually 8 weeks into this thing. Certainly in terms of the orders here in Pennsylvania, where I'm living, we've been kind of stay at home for the past couple of months. So adapting, enjoying the things that are good. I have both of my kids home and, my college kid and my high schooler, and we're having some time together that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's all very nice. And just really making some adjustments in how I work with my clients. So of course, we're not doing the face-to-face meetings. I'm not getting out and doing keynote speeches live, but lots of good stuff that we're able to do remotely, just as you and I are able to talk today. So, making the adjustments and doing okay. Thanks.
So, with that kind of adjustments, have your clients been pretty receptive to the remote, the differences between being on site? There's some people, they want the in-person face-to-face. And I think it's always better to have that in-person face-to-face, but has the adoption to being more remote been okay for most people?
I have to tell you, it really has been. And I think part of it is that, my work has always involved kind of a combination of meeting face-to-face, maybe at the client's place of work, or, if it's an offsite meeting or a keynote, at some event location, mixed in with some phone calls and video conferences and so on. So it's not a total switch. And most of the work I do is with corporate executives who do a ton of work. Anyhow, lots of phone calls, lots of video. So they've been receptive. We've had really actually quite nice continuity, even in the face of some forced changes in the way we connect.
Mm-hmm. So in your book, we talked a lot about, slowing down, trying to be intentional about things, and things have kind of been forced to slow down. And sometimes that's hard for people, especially when you're forced to do something. And how have you seen or talked to people that have been forced to slow down in a way that they weren't expecting or weren't anticipating? And maybe how has that affected them mentally? And what can they do to ease into this? Because I know for me, it's been kind of challenging sometimes to slow down and take inventory of what's actually going on.
Well, yes, and you're not alone, John. I think that's an extremely, typical, normal response to uncertainty, to really rapid change that has been foisted upon us that we did not see coming. There's a whole lot of mental and emotional adaptation, as well as pragmatic adaptation. So we talked about people are on Zoom calls all the time now, and we can talk a little bit about that. And Zoom is or Zoom like calls such as, there's Google calls. Well, we know there's all different ways that people can connect, but they're wonderful and they're helpful and they're exhausting at the same time. You may have seen there are a number of articles that have come out that there's something they're calling Zoom fatigue, which is a kind of exhaustion when you are sitting in front of a video call all day long, day after day, that is different from and maybe more intensive than being in person, and or just being on the phone. So there. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say we have some friends that we do Zoom games with. In the evenings we've done it with a couple of different couples, and try to play games and try to do things on Zoom. And then I reached out to one of my other friends and said, "Hey, I didn't know if you and your wife wanted to join the Zoom game." He's like, "I can't be on Zoom again." He's like, "On Saturdays I'm not on Zoom. I can't do it."
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, there are a lot of people who started doing exactly what you're talking about, in the first several weeks, and maybe doing more, not just business calls, but personal friendship, family calls via Zoom than ever before. And again, it's a great way to connect when you can't see people face to face. But yeah, I am seeing increasingly, both on the work side and on the personal side, people saying, we can chat on the phone a little bit, but I can't do it anymore. And I think part of the thing with Zoom is, when you have multiple people on a Zoom, first of all, you're sort of attending to lots of different faces all at the same time. So if you have, a dozen people in a room, you're kind of looking at the person who's talking, right? Maybe occasionally glancing at expressions of people around you. But, when you're on a Zoom call and you see lots of different faces simultaneously, I think it's almost a pinball effect where you kind of, your gaze and your attention ends up bouncing from face to face, trying to read and assess what's the person thinking. Are they responding to me in a certain way? You probably can't help but, look at yourself. How am I coming across? And is my hair out of place? And there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm not surprised to hear that even for a fun like game sort of call, you're getting a little bit of pushback at this point because people need to sort of decompress and disconnect a little bit more.
So what are some things that maybe leaders and managers can do or should do when they're thinking about, setting up that next one-on-one on Zoom or Teams or whatever tool that they're using, that next digital meeting that may make it a little bit easier or fun for their team?
Well, I guess there are a few things that they can do. First of all, I think this is a perfect time to assess how many meetings do we really need to have and which are the most important meetings to have. And it may very well be that some of the conversations that are required in sort of a business as usual environment can get postponed or reduced to help give people a little bit of a respite from the continual bouncing from video call to video call. I actually recommend once we get past this crisis that sort of filter get put on anyway, because often I find that businesses and business leaders call for more meetings than are absolutely necessary. It actually can be sort of a detriment to productivity if there are too many and if they're done with too many people and too great a frequency. So that's one thing I would say, to make the meetings a bit shorter. So where you might have had an hour call, maybe try to trim it down to 30 or 40 minutes so that people have a little bit of breathing room from call to call, can gather their thoughts and set up, whatever action steps they may need to have, so that doesn't become an end of the day catch up. I would also say, if it's a one-on-one, I would ask the person on your team, what's their preference? Hey, we have a one-on-one call. I think it's important that we talk about topics X, Y, and Z. You want to do that with video, or shall we just talk on the phone? And let them choose. They may very well say, hey, let's just talk on the phone. I think that, and it gives people a little bit more sense of control too over the way their days run.
Yeah, I like that. Giving them some input and control over the meeting, but also, some people would prefer to see somebody and some people just wouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it really, the broader point here too, John, is often leaders will either assume they know what their team members want, or they will, perhaps say, well, listen, this is the way we do business. And this is, you have to kind of conform to my preferences. I think there's a balance to be struck. I think the more you know about the people working for and with you, the more you ask for their input and their preferences, the better you can tailor your approach so that you're really getting the most from everybody, rather than insisting that everybody conform to the way you want it to be.
Yeah. So, what are some of the things that you've seen as far as like tips that you may have for people like me that have been stuck in a house? I'm stuck in a new house too, which I haven't had any visitors yet for
Yeah.
for 8 weeks, and you're trying to stay mentally strong and healthy, not just for your own sanity and your family, but also for your team and putting forth that good face. You always want to be strong for your team, right? So, what are some tips that you may have for people that are in that situation?
Yeah, I've got a few for you. I will tell you, because we're only on a call, you can't see this, but I'm actually speaking to you from my backyard shed.
Oh,
And the reason I'm in the backyard shed is because with the two people in my home all the time that, weren't typically in my home when life was normal. My son would have been in school. My daughter would be away at her apartment at college, and two pets. It can be hard to get peace and quiet and privacy. So I literally just discovered this morning that I can do some calls and conversations from the shed. The reason I mention it is because if you can find some place in your home that is private and protected from disruption, and that's not always feasible, but if you can find something, or if you can do some things from out in your yard or someplace nearby, it gives you some sense of your own space. It removes some distractions, and it can be very freeing and calming. So that would be one recommendation. I would also say, I mean, here in northeastern Pennsylvania, the weather is finally starting to become truly spring-like. It's beautiful. Get out every day. Take a walk. If you like to ride your bike, get on your bike. Of course, you're going to want to follow whatever the recommendations are around, masks and social distancing, and do what makes you feel most comfortable. But the physical activity and the getting out in nature have a very important impact on our physical and emotional well-being. And it allows us to think more freely and creatively. So that's super important. Some of the basics can easily be forgotten in this kind of new world we're living in, where we are in some ways busier than ever, and there are more competing demands on our time. So making sure that you are eating healthily and well. It is very easy. You probably see all over the place people talking about putting on, the COVID-15, because we're all going for comfort foods and maybe that nightly glass of wine. But if you don't attend to eating healthily and well, that too takes an impact on our thinking and our mood and our productivity and our general well-being. And side by side with that is getting some great sleep, the best you can. A sense of crisis makes it hard to sleep comfortably and well, but to figure out what's your routine, how do you keep a peaceful sleeping environment, sounds very basic, but without that, it is very hard to feel healthy and well and grounded, and so forth. So a couple others, and make sure you have good social support, to stay in touch with people in whatever way feels healthy and grounding for you, whether that's a call or a video chat or a couple of emails and texts. And ensure that you also get some alone time, that you're not constantly surrounded by others. Some people need this more, some people need this less, but every day to try to get a little time to yourself, to think, to decompress, to prioritize, etc., I think will go a long way.
Yeah, I know for me, one of the things that I think I was really lucky actually during this whole thing to be moving. At first, I thought, well, this is terrible timing. This is awful. But now that I'm here, I'm like, well, the new house has a basement, and the basement is kind of like my place. This is where I come to work. This is where I can shut off. I can send the kids to another room, and I can be in the basement and do calls like this or any other call that I'm doing, and just kind of be my own little place. And I think that's really important, that I can have that and not be crammed in on top of other people sometimes. But also, getting out and getting out and doing things and being able to step outside for a little bit is fantastic. And being able to go outside and take the kids and go for a walk. I'll ride bikes. We try to do it twice a day, right before lunch. So when we take our lunch break before we eat, we're going to go for a little walk with the kids, get outside, and then do it right at the end of the day. So when we sign off for the day, let's go out, do a little walk, get some nature. And now I'm being outside more. I'm having the fresh air, and all those things are kind of, I think, keeping me mentally strong as well as healthy. I've noticed on my little Apple Watch, you have the your settings of how many minutes of exercise you're supposed to get a day, and I would usually hit that maybe 4 out of 7 days or 5 out of 7 days. Normally, I haven't missed one since we've been on quarantine. And it's just because of all the activity of going out, doing the walks, and then plus the normal routines that you do. So yeah, I think it's been really good. And I think those pieces of advice are great. And sometimes people feel like, I'm the leader, so I have to always be connected, and I have to always be on Slack. I have to always have my Zoom open. I've got to have email open. I got to respond right away so that they know that I'm actually working all the time. But sometimes you need to take that minute or two to step away, go for a walk, and let people know, hey, I'm going for a walk. I'll be gone for the next 30 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever, so that you can mentally be prepared for the rest of the day.
I completely agree with you. I mean, 100%. And, I was actually on a call a couple of days ago with one of my clients who is CEO of a regional medical center. And of course, she and her staff are on the front lines of COVID. They're in New Jersey. They have a lot of cases. And, I asked her, what was she noticing? What was one of the things she was noticing being different in a positive way, having to deal with this crisis. And she really talked about kind of the connection between people and a kind of common humanity. And I think that's really interesting because I've noticed with so many Zoom calls and people working from home, there is a kind of informality that you would not have seen otherwise. You see people are on calls in their, in their bedrooms or their dens, or I'm out in my shed, and maybe not quite as buttoned up as they would be. And, you talked about letting your folks know, hey, I'm out for a walk. Well, that's kind of sharing. Hey, I'm a person. I've got these needs to connect with my family. Little downtime's important, little clearing of the head. I think it allows people to connect to their teams and teams to their leaders in a way that might have been a little more formalized before all of this hit. So, I think that's great that you're doing that. And you really do, as a leader, have to put on your own oxygen mask first. You just have to make sure that you are in a good space if you are going to take good care of the people who work for and with you.
So what are some things we can do, maybe if we've seen signs of somebody on our team that aren't handling the lockdown very well? Maybe you see in Slack that they're, itching to get back to work and are, they're a little testier than usual. And is there something that we should do or can do or help them out, or is it overstepping our bounds? It's kind of a confusing place, when you're in a corporate environment, of how do you handle something like that?
Yeah, it sure is. And everybody's a little bit different in terms of how comfortable they feel sharing personal issues, with their boss or, in a work setting. But I would say this, there's never any harm in asking. And there's often a lot of good in asking the people that are working for you, those who are showing signs of distress and those who aren't, because we don't always know who's struggling. It's not always obvious. But to connect with everybody that works for you, everybody that is closely connected to you in a business environment, and just check in, hey, I just, forget the business stuff for a minute. Just wanted to see how you're doing. How's your family? If there's anything at all that you want to talk about, if you're finding that there are some challenges in meeting deadlines, or you need help with any of the work stuff, or there's something going on that, maybe you didn't feel comfortable sharing with me, but, I really invite you to, to open that dialogue in a very understanding way, very compassionate way, I think is incredibly valuable. And in fact, probably shifts the relationship in a way that with hope will persist even after everybody's, back to some semblance of normal. We'll never be back to a total normal, but as things rebalance, you create such a connection and such goodwill with those conversations that I think they should be done regardless, but for sure in times of crisis. So that's number one. Number two would be to really be clear on what are genuine priorities in the face of everything that people are facing and struggling with right now. There may very well be, and almost certainly are, activities that are lower priority or even need to get taken off the list altogether. And if you can reduce some burden and cut some slack, it will go a very far way. Again, create goodwill, and this takes enough pressure off that people can focus on what's most important, their best work, and stay in the best mental place they can be, which is, of course, essential on so many levels.
Yeah, for sure. I know, like for me, some of the things that I've tried to, set up one-on-ones with my team and have conversations with them on a regular basis, so that I'm, trying to catch things before they get, too bad, and try to, tell people that, hey, right now we're just in survival mode. We're not going to worry about necessarily moving certain things forward. However, in some cases, I've seen some people that have extremely thrived in this kind of situation. They've just kind of been able to be better than they were before. And maybe that's just a sign of adversity, overcoming adversity. They're really good at that. Or maybe it's a sign of the fact that now they're in a situation where they can focus better. They're not being
Mm-hmm.
distracted by the people around them in the office. I don't know what it is, but I've seen both sides, and I think it's important for leaders to just be empathetic for people that are in both situations.
Absolutely. And what's interesting, so the folks that are thriving now, and maybe it is because, they don't, maybe their commute's been, taken away so that they get a couple more minutes of sleep in the morning, or, they don't have the distractions of the workplace, whatever it might, where they thrive under times of crisis, whatever that might be, to really take note of that, because you'll want to make sure that they can continue to thrive. Again, when and if things go back to some normalcy, again, I think they will. I don't think it'll be completely the same, but you want to recognize how well they're doing and give them everything they need to continue to be successful, very successful afterwards. And that hand in hand with what you're saying, to empathize that, everybody's going to handle this differently, and they will need different things from you as a leader, both now and in the future. The more you can kind of tailor your approach and your connection to the different people in your team based on who they are and what they need, the better the whole team will operate and the better business outcomes you'll get.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I want to shift gears just a little bit and maybe plug some of the things that we talked about on the last episode and that came out of your book, Slow Down and Speed Up, and some of the things that I've applied from this during our lockdown, somewhat unintentionally. It just kind of happened that way because it was ingrained in my brain. I don't know, but it kind of happened that way. But one of the things we talked about before was we created an agreement with those around you. And I think during lockdown, it's important to do that with your family. We've kind of done that with me and my wife and my kids. We've created an agreement that when someone's on a call, let's give them privacy. Let's leave them alone a little bit so they're not distracted and they can focus on that call. However, when we also have an agreement as far as like, I'm going to take care of, teaching the youngest kid this week, and next week we'll switch, and you'll take the oldest kid and vice versa. And so we're not just running around crazy trying to figure out who's going to do this assignment. Did you do that assignment? Did you handle this? No, we're going to do this. And we've also come up with an agreement. This is the time we're all going to do lunch together. That way we have a family lunch. It's all scheduled. We're not having to, you have a call. Well, I have a call. Well, I have a 1:00. You have a 12:00. So when are we going to eat lunch? Who's going to make lunch for the kids? And there's all that confusion is kind of taken away because we have agreements of when things are going to happen, and we're good with that. It's kind of made things so much easier, so much simpler. We don't have to talk about it and figure it out. It's done ahead of time, and we're going to just follow that and move forward.
I think that's great. And that really is one of the core tenets of slowing down to speed up. So it takes a little, so if it were a work situation, if we're talking about having creating agreement with your team, we might say, ensuring alignment with your stakeholders, and we could sort of businessize it, but it's really about how do you come to mutual understanding and agreement about what's the structure that we're operating in, what are the parameters, who's responsible for what, how will we make sure that we're doing okay. So I think sitting down to lunch together at the same time is a nice way to make sure that everybody's doing okay and able to check in with each other and all of that. It takes just a little bit of time to have those conversations and to refine and revise as you go along, because maybe some things aren't working as well as you thought. So you need to do it a little bit differently. But it pays off in dividends, because once you get those constructs in place and some agreement in place, then you don't have to deal with the daily disruptions quite as much, and you're able to bounce back when things don't go as planned. You can say, hey, remember we talked about X, Y, and Z. Can we get back to that, or do we need to shift it, or what can I do to be helpful? So I think it's great to hear that you're applying it in family life, and my guess is you're probably applying it as a leader as well.
Yeah. And I've been, absolutely lucky too that I've had, good people around me to help me with some of the stuff too, such as I looked at some of the things we talked about. We talked about narrowing your priorities, and that you had to limit the priorities. And during this time, it's been very simple that, we're not going to go after some of the big projects that we originally planned on doing this year that aren't necessary. They were just kind of value add projects. Well, let's table those or slow them down for just a little bit, and let's narrow our priorities to just supporting the people that are now working from home. When you have a company and you're managing a technology department, and let's say you have several hundred employees that never worked from home and now they have to work from home, that transition period and mobilizing that workforce is pretty difficult, and that needs to be your new priority. So let's eliminate the other ones. Whereas I've seen some bosses and leaders that have said, well, no, we're going to try to get everything done we plan on doing, as well as taking over this. And that seems to be just a huge confusion and, mess. Whereas when you narrow your priorities and just say, here's the one thing we're working on, this is our number one goal, and we're all going to do this together. We're going to focus on this one thing. And if there's time, then these are other things we can do. But right now we're going to work on this one thing.
Absolutely right. I mean, I think maybe when we spoke last, we talked a little bit about what I call now, later, never. And it's really what you're describing, right? Like, what are the things that in the here and now are most essential, bring the most value, are most important? Let's put the majority of our time, effort, and energy into those things. What are the things that are later? So yeah, what might have felt like a now activity 2-3 months ago becomes a later, right? And some of those things might even turn into a never. Well, we thought this was great, but the timing won't be right in 6 months. So we'll take this off the list and we'll do something different. And that requires a kind of flexibility and deliberate responsiveness to the external environment. That's incredibly valuable. So that's the other thing that I would say, John, that's related to this is, I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, but
Yes.
So at the bottom of that triangle or pyramid is, safety, right? Food and shelter. Am I safe? And that's really what we're at right now. Do people have a safe place to live? Do they have food to eat? Do they have confidence that there are paychecks coming in so that they can continue to feel secure? Are they healthy? Are family members healthy? That becomes, and you talked about making sure that employees who are now working from home are safe and attended to. That's now the foundation. But stuff on top, which Maslow calls self-actualization, we could call that business actualization, right? Like very top, most forward-thinking business results. Those are still important, but you can't get to that if you don't have people taken care of at the most foundational level.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that struck me that it was important, it kind of goes back to, I think we talked about a me, not me list before.
Yes.
When it was coming down to it, some of the things that were on the me list before, I've moved to the not me list now that we're in, work from home and quarantine. And I've delegated those to other people on the team that maybe they have more time because of the situation. They can't do some of the things that they used to do. So they have a little bit more bandwidth. And I figure there's not a better time that I can give them these tasks than right now, and let them, learn, excel, and do well at things that maybe I'm struggling with or have never really been good at anyway.
Well, I think that's great. And again, I'm always sort of thinking about what will help my clients be most successful today, and also what are the new best practices that they can bring into kind of a post-crisis world. And the me, not me is very important. There are lots of things like you're talking about where either you did it because it felt like it was your primary job responsibility, or you did it because maybe members of your team weren't quite prepared for it, or you didn't feel ready to let it go or something. But if you can start shifting those as you're doing and giving people the opportunity to rise to the occasion, to learn quickly, to go from, gee, that's impossible, to, oh, wow, I guess I can actually do this, then post-COVID crisis or post whatever the next crisis might be, well, then they can keep doing those things, and you are freed up to do some of the maybe more strategic or higher level leadership activities that, are most important for you in the role that you're in today.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been helpful for me because it not only gives me a little bit of sanity, but it also shows them that, we're not, getting rid of them during this time. We're going to find something else that's important that they can do. And
absolutely,
that we find value in them. And because they're valuable and because they're important to us, we're going to make sure we keep them, happy and working.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, listen, everybody needs a sense of purpose and meaning and value, and also a sense of confidence, as you're saying that they are needed, that you will have important work for them to do. When people have too little sense of that, when the confidence is not there, or simply when there's not enough to do, which is rarely a problem, but can be when life shifts. That's not great. People, you start to see anxiety mounting. People become disaffected from the work. They can't do their best work. But I really am a firm believer that if you give people more than they've had before without pushing too far, there's a sort of delicate balance, you really can help engage people, get the most, really the best work from them, and they're going to be loyal. They're going to want to stick around because they're doing good, exciting, meaningful work.
Yeah, for sure. And, as we're recording this, I don't know when things will open back up. I know schools are closed through the summer. I don't know when daycare is going to open back up. I don't know when businesses are really going to, I know some states have started to, maybe early, I don't know, let people back out, but we'll see. But let's say we do, things are lifted and people go back to the office. How should a leader handle this transition? What are some of the things that they should or should not do during this transition time to make sure that it goes well for the employees and for everyone's safety, as well as their mental health?
Well, I think there are a few things that are going to be most important right off the bat. With hope, every leader is communicating more often in more ways with greater clarity and greater transparency right now than ever before, and that really needs to continue. Here's the information we have. Here's the stuff we don't know yet. As we learn it, I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be clear and direct with you. That's incredibly valuable stuff. And so that consistent communication might even feel like over communication at points, but it's not, especially when people are adjusting to a new normal. You don't take everything in the first, second, or even the third time. So, keep that communication open and two-way, not just from you to your employees, but hearing from them, asking and hearing from them. How are they doing? What do they need? What opportunities do they want to pursue? What challenges do they see ahead of them, and so on. So the communication is important. And I think there needs to be some really deliberate assessment. I call this kind of a strategic pause in the busyness, but an assessment of, where's the business today? Where are we heading tomorrow? That may or may not be the same as what we thought it was, 3, 5, 6 months ago. How do we have to shift our strategy? What are the ways in which we have to think more near term rather than what we typically would have done, which might be looking out 2, 3, 5 years ahead? But that assessment of where we're at, what needs to change, what are best practices for being effective in today's new normal, what are the things that need to be avoided? And so some things might be very pragmatic. Hey, listen, we used to meet once a week for 2 hours as a leadership team. Do you guys still think that that's valuable? Do we need more time together, less time together, et cetera? There are many different ways that we can look at this. How do we deal with our customers? Do they need something different from us? If we're not sure, let's make sure we're asking them, et cetera. So communication, assessment, refinement as you go along, which requires that kind of open flexibility and adaptation. Those kinds of things are going to be very valuable moving forward.
Yeah, I like that. I like reflection. I think reflection is one thing when it comes to refinement, is to have that open dialogue about what's working, what's not working, what should we be thinking about that we're not thinking about, what's concerning you, and having those conversations with your team openly, I think is really important as well.
Yeah, it really is. And I think more than ever, it's always been important, but really more than ever for your employees to have a sense of psychological safety at work, where they can go to their boss and say, hey, I'm having a tough time with, whatever it might be. I'm having a tough time because the kids are still home all the time and I'm having difficulty, with some sort of daycare, or I've been sleeping really poorly. And so I probably need to start work a little later in the morning and I don't mind working a little later into the evening, or, whatever it might be, that to be able to feel safe that I can speak my mind, raise concerns and even raise the flag if I think there are some issues with the business or with customers or whatever, without fear of repercussion, whether it is subtle or overt. Sometimes people feel like if they open their mouths, there's going to be a consequence, a repercussion of some sort. So as a leader, to help your employees and your customers feel confident and safe, that's all going to be very, very important.
Yeah, I think that idea of safety, especially right now, because not only are people worried about the physical aspects of potentially getting this, but what about the financial aspects of what's going on, and so many people around them losing jobs, so many people filing for unemployment, and then the general uncertainty of what does the future hold for our company, and what does the future hold for me, and things like that. That could be really draining on someone's mental health right now.
Absolutely. And even when it's not top of mind, these are things that are kind of churning in the background for so many people. And you're right, it's beyond the am I healthy and well, and is my family healthy and well? There are really big, broad implications of all this. And we won't know for a while. uh, how we all do individually and collectively, personally and in a business context. I am very confident that there are many things that will return to both a comfortable level and may even be better as a result of kind of surviving and pushing through this crisis. But we don't want to be Pollyanna. And there are some things that are going to be difficult. And you're right, people are thinking about job security. They're thinking about their 401k. They're wondering if they can ever have a party again or have a big graduation celebration. I mean, these things are really meaningful to everyday life. So to be understanding, empathic, concerned, and also setting really clear parameters for your folks around, okay, this is very specifically what success is going to look like over the next month or quarter or 6 months, but reasonably near term. I think that's sort of thing's going to be pretty helpful too.
Yeah, I know. I've had, and there's still, I guess, a lot of questions to be answered and things that are going on. But I had a colleague of mine that, we were talking about how things are going throughout this situation, and they have a child that's getting ready to graduate high school. And I thought, oh wow, you're gonna miss graduation. He's like, oh, it's much bigger than that. They had a scholarship to play a sport in college. It's a spring sport. Well, all the spring athletes that were getting ready to graduate now have an extra year of eligibility, and it's possible that their scholarship they won't get their scholarship because they'll give it back to the seniors that are coming back. So now they have a chance of, well, now it's impacting my kids, going to college and which college they're going to go to. And, they may change a whole bunch of things, not just the fact that they don't get to walk at graduation or don't get to go to their prom, which are, big deals, but now it can be a more lasting change.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think it speaks to also the importance of having really meaningful dialogue. So if you ask somebody, how are you doing? Or, in this specific case, how's your child reacting to, not having the big graduation and all of that, but to probe a little bit more to the extent that the other person is comfortable. You never want to push so far that you make somebody feel like their privacy is being invaded. But if you open up the dialogue to, oh, well, what else? What else is that impacting? Or how else is that a problem? What else can I do to be of help to you, right? Just push a little bit beyond the surface level, and then you start to uncover it's like peeling the layers of an onion until you get to the center of it. That requires taking the time to sit and have good, open, honest conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Well, do you have any more advice for people that may be, going through this and getting ready to hopefully come back or transitioning back that you may want to offer, whether it be, for their own stability or for that of their teams?
Sure. One last thing that I would emphasize, and, I speak about this all the time, but I think now it may be more important than ever, is this concept of controlling the things that you can control. And so on a personal level, that can be what we talked about earlier, taking care of your family, eating well, getting social support, focusing on the most important priorities and so on. Control those controllable things. Influence where you can, but perhaps most importantly in today's day and age, kind of look around, accept what is. It doesn't mean you have to be comfortable with it. It doesn't mean you don't do anything about it, but figure out what do you have to do to adapt to the new realities. Yeah. The new reality is we have a global pandemic, and it looks different from anything anyone probably could have imagined. We have financial, economic issues that we may not have anticipated, and I'm sure we didn't, to the extent and with the breadth that they have today. We have global impacts. Okay, that's what the new normal is. But how do I adapt? I'm not going to spend all my time, effort, and energy trying to control the things over which I don't have control. But I do need to figure out how to be healthy, successful, and a good leader in the midst of all that. So I call that CIA, control, influence, accept, adapt. There's a whole lot that people can learn about that, either by reading my book, which is Slow Down to Speed Up, Lead, Succeed, and Thrive in a 24/7 World, or by simply checking out my LinkedIn profile, Liz Bywater, or go to the website. I've got a lot of free stuff on there, articles and podcasts and videos and all of that, and free sample of the book, a free sample chapter of the book. And that's simply my name, lizbywater.com. So a lot of free resources, and I would really encourage people to tap into those because I think there's some tools there that can be helpful in getting to the other side of all this.
Yeah, we'll link all that up in your show notes as well. And I've been, following you for a while, and your LinkedIn is great. You always post great stuff on there. So I definitely encourage everybody to check that out, as well as pick up the book, which you can find that at geekleader.com. We'll link to it. And Liz, thanks for coming back on the show. Really appreciate it. And hopefully you're staying safe and healthy, and we can do this again sometime.
Hey, thanks, John. Listen, it's always great talking to you. And likewise, listen, good luck with the new house. Take care of the kids, take care of the team, and take care of yourself. And I'm looking forward to speaking again.
Yep, will do. Thanks.
All right, take care now.
Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Dr. Liz Bywater, and hopefully you learned something and you're going to have some good mental health going forward with COVID-19. And also, don't forget to check out our sponsor, BurkaWeb. You can find out all kinds of information about web hosting stats, and all the cool stuff that maybe the hosts aren't telling you as far as their speeds and their actual performance numbers. Check out BurkaWeb.com, Berkaweb.com.